Over 20 years ago, back in 2002, we got the Jango Fett Slave 1, and it instantly became a classic, but over 20 years passed without getting another iteration of this ship. That was until 2025 where we got not one new Jango Fett Slave 1, but two, the UCS as well as the playset versions. And in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at all three and determine which version of this ship is the best. By using 5 categories using the minifigures, the play features, the displayability, the value, as well as my overall opinion. Now, our first Slave 1 released back in 2002. Given set number 7153, this set has 358 pieces, 2 minifigures, and it retailed for just $49.99 back in the day. And while I'm not comparing the boxes for these sets, but the 2002 version definitely clears with all of the different sets shown in the backgrounds, as well as having cutaways from the actual movie and alternate builds. There is just so much to look at, versus now we have our plain old black boxes. And looking toward our UCS version of the Jango Fett Slave 1, given set number 75409 with 2,970 pieces and 2 minifigures. This was the second time that we ever saw this ship, and the first time that we ever saw it in its UCS form. And lastly, and most recently, we have set 75433, the Jango Fett Starship. This set has 707 pieces and 3 minifigures and a retail of $69.99 in the US. So with all of our 3 sets introduced, let's dive into this and discover which of these Slave 1s is the best. Now, our first category is going to be the minifigures, which we have a lot of overlapping characters in Jango Fett as well as young Boba Fett, which does make sense, but if we look toward our most recent set, we actually have a Llama Su tacked on to the end. But let's get a closer look at these minifigures. Starting off in the 2002 version, we had a very nice OG version of Jango Fett as well as Boba Fett, and while they may be a bit outdated today, they still have that classic charm that a lot of people love. Moving on to 2025 in the UCS version, we have this very nice version of Jango Fett with arm printing, as well as a not so nice version of Boba Fett, but nonetheless, they are both some highly detailed minifigures. It's just unfortunate that Boba Fett was done the way he was. But moving on to 2025 in the playset, we have a version of Jango Fett without arm printing, the same exact version of Boba Fett as well as our Llama Su. And given the fact that this has 3 minifigures, I think it's definitely already in the lead for the minifigure category. Let's take a closer look at our 3 Jango Fett minifigures. All the way on the left, we have our OG version from 2002, and well, I do think he has that classic charm that a lot of people, including myself, do love. Definitely is outdated compared to the other 2 versions that we have seen. These newer versions just overall having more detailing, printing, as well as being a more accurate minifigure when compared to the latter from 2002, which definitely does make sense as LEGO has had over 20 years to evolve their minifigure game, so it does make sense that these would be a lot better when compared to the previous. So the main breakdown comes down to both of these 2 newer versions of Jango Fett, which are exactly the same, minus the fact that the version that did not come in the UCS set has no arm printing. And the difference is definitely night and day, especially when you look from the side. The detailing on the arm with the printing just stands out between the other 2 minifigures, and for that reason, I do think that it is the best of both minifigures. Now, flipping around to the back, you can see that the 2 of our newer Jango Fetts have the exact same jetpack, while the older has a molded jetpack which is attached to the helmet, which is definitely cool, but it does take away the ability to remove the jetpack, as well as making it so you cannot attach the rangefinder, which is a piece that looks very good on both of the newer versions of Jango Fett. Now, removing the helmets, you can see our Jango Fett face beneath, as well as the hairpiece included in all 3 minifigures. And well, on the left, I think the 2002 version with the balaclava head definitely is the best, as well as having the most detailing with the printing on the front. However, I will say that the newer 2 do have a bit more detailing and a lot more accuracy when it comes to the printing, especially having an actual flesh tone color and not the OG classic yellow, as nostalgic as it is. And this set with the best Jango Fett, in my opinion, has to be the UCS version. It has some great detailing with the arm printing, as well as just being the most accurate, and I will say that the OG version, while being very close to my heart, is just definitely outdated when compared to the newer versions. Next up, we have our young Boba Fett, and while this minifigure was a very big controversy in these 2 newer sets, it being the same minifigure in both the UCS as well as the playset, it just has a lot of issues from the hair to the printing on the torso, which for that reason alone, I almost want to give this just straight away to the older version of Boba. He does still have the outdated printing quality, as well as having the yellow skin tone, just doesn't look right for the character. But looking past that, there aren't really any issues with it. And then toward the newer ones, my biggest issue with them just being the hairpiece not looking right. I understand they were going for kind of the wet hair look. I just don't think it was the right move for either of these sets, and I wish that we would have seen it change in the newer one, but it is kind of unfortunate, and honestly, I think I would give the best boba to the older version. And now, well, the OG set as well as the UCS set does have a point. Our third point goes to the newer playset, as we do have the Lamasu minifigure, which on its own is an amazing minifigure with a brand new mold and great printing throughout, as well as having these spikes on the head. It's just a great minifigure overall, and given the fact that this set actually has a third minifigure, I do think outweighs the differences in the other minifigures, giving the win of the best minifigure category to the newest playset from 2025. Now moving on to our next category being the playability. And all three of these sets have some pretty unique play features as well as some that overlap. So let's take a closer look starting with our 2002 playset. And I want to look at our blasters on the front side of the nose of this ship. Using the OG piece for blasters that everyone knows and loves, these are put on a small little Technic swivel, which allows them to move at pretty much a 360-degree angle. And they do move separately, but they can also move in tandem, which is a nice feature. And they do look very good, as well as having a very good range of motion definitely makes them a very fun play feature. And this is something that the UCS model knocked out of the park. Not only is it a very aesthetically pleasing blaster build, they also work perfectly. Having a full range of motion, as well as having a little bit of resistance when you move them so they don't go all sporadically, and you can even move the lower gun on the front. And with these being a great play feature, but they also look great and do not take away from the build in any way, which is something that I definitely cannot say about the newest playset from 2025. Not only did they put on these stud shooters that don't look good, it got rid of any range of motion that was previously had on any other models. So you lose the entire option to move and pose them. Now you do gain the ability to shoot off your stud shooters, but honestly I think this is a pretty negative trade-off, as a lot of people don't like these stud shooters in the first place, and now you can't even move and position your weapons on the front of your ship. Now our next category is going to be the loading bay located at the front of all of our ships. And starting off in 2002, we actually have a pretty spacious area here, which does allow you to access the interior. And while there is no door to close it back up, there you can actually fit your minifigure in here, which is a great inclusion, which I do think is a very nice feature, and I would have been happy with a door, but we do actually get a small compartment down here where we have some sort of seismic charge or other sorts of bombs that are hidden below. And while they are very hard to get out of this small compartment, it's still a very fun feature. And this is something that was carried on to our newest version of the Jango Fett's playset. Now, there isn't really any access to the interior of this ship, unfortunately, given its very small nature due to the downscaling. You can see the Boba Fett, for comparison, is actually massive, but if we do lift up this small compartment, you get once again a little area where you have your seismic charges. This time they do resemble them a lot more, but there's actually a very fun play feature mixed in here with a trap door at the bottom where you can shoot out your seismic charges. And it is a lot of fun. Now this is connected on these small hinge pieces and then it just clicks into place on a couple of studs. It's honestly probably my favorite play feature from the newer 2025 playset, and then you can just pick up your seismic charge and plop them back in. And while they are some very tiny seismic charges, they do have a pretty nice design and they do resemble them a lot more than the Transoran pieces from the 2002 version. But unfortunately, the loading bay in the UCS model just blows the other two out of the park. And you may not see it at first glance, but all you have to do is push down on the base and it will open up the loading bay for the Slave 1. And this is probably the most satisfying play feature in any LEGO set that I have ever owned, and you can actually fit your minifigure into the interior of the Slave 1, which is great. Now it's not really a perfect feature, it's not like that is what it is made for, but there's enough room to kind of fit your fingers back there, and you could put your Boba Fett back there if you really wanted to, and then to close it you simply push down the Technic bar and it closes back up like it was never open. Seriously, this is just so fun to sit around, play with, fidget with. Maybe it's just some ADHD, but I do overall think that this is the best loading bay that we have seen on a LEGO set, and definitely the best out of all of these Slave 1s. It's just so fun to play with, and it was integrated so well into this model. And there actually is also a seismic charge on this. However, it is not in the loading bay. It is held where it's supposed to be, in the back chamber, where you can peel down this wall, remove the plates, and it reveals your seismic charge. And this thing, in the actual scale of what the seismic charge should be, is so much fun to deploy. You simply reach in, you can pull it out and it shoots right off. And this thing has some great details on it. And yes, it is all stickered. I know that's a problem for some people. Yes, it would have been nice if this was printed, but the stickers still do look amazing, but they were very hard to apply. And then when you're done, it simply clips right back into place and you can cover it back up with your plates as if it was never there. And I have to say, the combination of this loading bay as well as the seismic charge in the back makes this a pretty easy clear for the UCS version. But now it's time for the 2002 version to shine, as it has quite a few of unique play features only found in this version. The first of which is this compartment where you can hold Jango's blasters, a nice inclusion but is very small, especially when compared to all of these other compartments that are found throughout. In the top, we have a couple of missiles as well as what I think is a back to tank, which is very fun to play with. They slot in very easily and then can close right back up, but my favorite of which has to be the foldable missiles on the inside of this ship. They are so cool. You simply fold down the door and then you can pull out these quad missiles, which looks so cool. And you can actually pull these out of either side. Everything is symmetrical when it comes to these play features on the nose, and these things look so sick. They're so fun to play with, and it looks so menacing once you pick this ship up and actually start flying it around with the missiles out. And they're so easy to fold and put away. You just fold them back in on the little clip, and then you can close the doors and they were just gone, like they were never there. It was integrated so well and you can cover it up perfectly. Next up, we have probably the coolest feature about all of these Slave 1s. Well, maybe not all of them, but starting off in 2002, we had our independent wings that kind of move with the gravity overall, allowing them to move from an upright as well as a down position. Now, this one uses this big brick in the back that is very heavy and allows it to do this throughout gravity and not needing any assistance from you. All you do is tip the ship and it does it on its own. Now, this is also a feature that we see in the UCS version, albeit it doesn't work as flawlessly as it did in the 2002 version. It does get stuck sometimes, but it still does move independently, which is definitely a fun feature. However, this was thrown out the window when it comes to our 2025 playset, as no matter how much tilting and flicking, there is no movement on these side wings at all. The only way to move them is to actually go spin them, and they actually spin very easily, which honestly isn't really a good thing because it makes them get out of whack very easily. But you can spin them around just like a little fidget spinner. It's not the best. I would have loved if these were also gravity assisted like they were in the previous versions, and they do not move at all, but it still does get the job done, I guess. It's just a bit of a downgrade in my opinion. Now, while we're up here, I figured that we should talk about stability, as it does come into the factor of how you play with your sets. Starting off with our 2002 one, well, this one is pretty fragile as it is an old set from 20 years ago. It is still pretty sturdy. You're able to hold it from pretty much wherever you want. I wouldn't hold it from the wings, and I also wouldn't hold it exclusively from the cockpit, but you still can. It is a very sturdy set, and it does definitely hold up even today. And you can swoosh it around. The best way that I've found is to hold it in the back, and you can swoosh it around, and this set is a lot of fun. Now, moving on to our 2025 playset, it's definitely the sturdiest of the bunch, but that's mostly because it is so downsized in comparison. And with all of these downsized sets, you can definitely do some fun things with them. Like I could spin this around like this if I really wanted to, and it's not going to fall apart. These are all very sturdy because they are also downsized, which, may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing on whoever you're asking, but this one definitely not going anywhere. You can hold it from pretty much anywhere. But when it comes to our UCS set, now, disclaimer, this isn't something that you're really supposed to be picking up and moving around and playing with too much, but I mean, you can. I would keep two hands on it at all times. Yes, you can go one-handed if you're crazy, if you want to live on the edge a little bit, but nonetheless, I will break if you try and hold it up from the front of the nose, unfortunately, but it's an easy fix. It's not like it comes collapsing apart, but overall, you can pick it up. It is pretty sturdy. It's just harder to pick up because how big it is, but it is a very fun one to swoosh around. Definitely makes you feel like you're a bounty hunter flying around with how big this is, and it is a great set. It's just a little bit hard to maneuver. Now, moving on to our cockpit section, starting off in 2002, you can remove the windscreen piece, which reveals a pretty detailed cockpit, especially for 2002. You have some nice printed pieces for all of your detailing, and it is actually quite spacious given the size of this ship. There's more than enough room to fit both of your minifigures and then close it back up, but this is where it reveals my favorite play feature on this whole ship, is that it's not only the wings that move independently, it's the inside of the cockpit as well, moves up and down, and this is just so cool to see your minifigures minifigures move on the inside of the ship and have a full range of motion. Definitely the coolest play feature out of all of these sets in my opinion. Now this is doable because with this thing it is connected to the magnetic piece and the big heavy block on the back, which allows it to move in tandem with the wings. It's just such a cool play feature. I really haven't seen anything like this in any other LEGO set, and it's just a one of a kind play feature, which goes to show why this 2002 version is so good and still holds up today. Now moving on to our 2025 playset, definitely a bit challenging to get your minifigures in there, but I mean it is, well, it doesn't look too spacious. You can actually fit both your Jango Fett and your Boba Fett in here, which I was quite surprised to see. Now you can sit them down and then the Boba stands squished in behind them, and while it doesn't look like it's too comfortable, they both do fit. So I'll give that to LEGO. I definitely wasn't expecting them to both fit in here, and while they do look very cramped, it closes up just fine, and I think it is a very fun play feature, and I was just so surprised to see that two minifigs could fit in this tiny interior. Now moving on to the interior and the cockpit area, for the UCS version, you simply remove your windscreen and you get access to this massive interior, which is almost as big as the entirety of the 2025 playset. And you can remove your main kind of seating area for the cockpit, and then you can come around and you can even remove this back panel, which will relieve a little bit of a back to tank, which I think is a great inclusion. But we also have seating below the main part for the cockpit, just so much space in the interior, which I think is great. You can fit your minifigures onto these seats if you wanted to. Does leave us to, would have been nice to have gotten a couple of other minifigs in this set to, fill up these seats. But let's move on to the main portion of the cockpit, where we have a bunch of very fun sticker pieces. Personally, my favorite is the one that shows the Slave 1, but we also have some targeting computers and navigation computers, and there's just so much space and stuff throughout this cockpit. You can fit your minifigures in nicely, and then you can slide them right back into place on top of these little rails on the sides. And once they're in there, it just looks so great. Having all the different detailing as well as all of the space just makes this the best interior out of all of these different Slave 1s. And while this next part isn't necessarily a play feature, it definitely does go into account of how you play with this set, and that is the display stand or lack thereof for each of these sets. Now starting off with our 2002 version actually does not need a display stand to stand up. Now personally, I would not recommend displaying it like this. As you can see, it puts a lot of stress onto the back pieces, and it's not the sturdiest. This definitely wiggles a little bit, and I wouldn't trust it, but it is nice that it was designed in a way that it can stand upright just like this without the help of any other sort of third-party build coming into play. Now, as for our 2025 version, we do have this small little carrier, which, lets you hold up this set by plugging into the back. And it definitely works very well. Now, it does make it look a little bit weird when you are displaying it like this, but it holds it up just fine, and having this does actually bring in a nice new play feature that is not seen in the other ones. You actually have your little cart to drive stuff around. Jango Fett can sit in there, control it. You have a little crate in the back. It's a fun little feature. It's not necessarily something that you're looking for when buying a Slave 1, but it's definitely a play feature worth noting when it comes to this set. And then moving on to the display stand for the UCS version, which is definitely a lot beefier and more serious than all the others, as this is a very heavy model, but it definitely does its job in holding this upright. And well, it isn't really a play feature. It does have some nice information and is more of a UCS feature than an actual play feature. But moving on to the winner of the category, I think it has to go to the 2002 version. It just has so much going for it with all of these exclusive play features, and I feel like there's just so much to do with this set when compared to the other two. The UCS version has some great integrated play features, but I do feel like when it comes to this 2002 model, it just knocks it out of the park. Now, our next category is a bit one-sided, as it is the display category, and UCS sets are pretty much exclusively designed with display in mind. It has a very nice display plaque, display stand, and as you make your way up the side, you see all of the different detailing, the greebling, all of the thought put behind every single brick placed on this set, as well as having like airbrush detailing written on it. You're not going to find that on any of these other Slave 1s, as this UCS set is pretty much exclusively made to be a display piece and be accurate and be detailed. So as we look past this, it is more of a battle for second place when it comes to our 2002 and 2025 playsets. And while the 2002 version is a little bit outdated to say the least, it still has some redeeming qualities. But overall, there's just a lot of visible studs. Now, I will say some of the printed pieces look very nice, but with all the visible studs and the overall just discoloring, especially when compared to the newer version, with all of the new pieces available at disposal, as well as all of the nice stickers, definitely makes it look like it is leaning in that direction. But as we look toward these sides, you can see really the difference in the size of these actual builds. With just the buildup on the UCS version being 3 times the size, but you have to take a moment to appreciate the craftsmanship and all of the angles that were able to be accomplished with all of the different techniques for the side. There's just so much going on here. It looks so great. Not trying to just sit here and glaze the UCS set, but even as we come into the connection for the wings, there's so much detailing, so many different pieces that all come together to make this a perfect model. And there's just so much going on. And when you compare that to something like the 2002 version, where they just didn't have any of this in their disposal, it just looks a bit lackluster in comparison, especially when you look in the well as round as even the wings, just doesn't really have any detailing. But it is something that was kind of fixed up in the 2025 playset. Yes, it's beefed up a little bit more when it comes to the width and the detailing with all the different angles and sticker pieces. However, it's just never going to compare to the UCS version. However, I will say there was definitely some good attempts here. Now, as we shift our attention to the nose and looking toward the UCS model, once again just blows the other out of the park with all of the different detailing, the overall structure, and the detailing with these stickers, as well as just how this whole thing comes together. It was just done amazingly, not even to mention the interior that we looked at earlier with all of its great detailing and the overall shape just being perfect. And when you compare that to the 2002 model, which is, pretty discolored, having a lot more gray and black and a lot more white, it doesn't really have any of that green detailing on the nose. I will say it has some very cool exclusive printed pieces, which are really nice to see, but it's just not going to hold a candle to the other two models, as 20 years of difference and evolution for LEGO gives them the opportunity to make these sets look a lot better, especially in these smaller play sets. They do tend to be packed full of detailing, and it does have some nice sticker details. And overall, even though the 2025 version is quite downsized, I think it still does look pretty good. But let's move our attention to the back of these vehicles. And once again, I don't think there's any question of who the clear winner here is. The UCS model just has so much going for it, and you can see all the complex strategies that were used to get this together. You also have the beautiful thrusters in the back that look just so good with the yellow on top of the white, as well as the brown kind of coloring. Just looks so good. And when you compare something like this to the 2002 version, they gave it their best shot, I guess. I love the trans like orange coloring that was used to signify the different thrusters on the back. And you even have the big kind of cage piece in the back, which is something that you don't see in the 2025 version, but the 2025 playset does have a nice representation of the thrusters, a lot better than the 2002 version. And overall, while it wasn't done perfectly, it still does get the point across, and it's not something that you're really looking for in a playset, but the UCS version definitely knocked this out of the park. And like I said, the display category was pretty skewed from the start. The UCS version, like I said, it's a UCS set, Ultimate Collector Series. It's going to be collected, it's going to be displayed. So it's pretty obvious and very, everyone knew that it was going to take home this category. It'd be very upsetting if it didn't. And it does have some great minifigures as well. But let's move on to our next category, which is going to be value. Now, starting off with our 2002 version, well, this is a great set and definitely one that I would love to recommend you to get. If you buy one new in box, it's going to cost you around $900. And this set, well, being lovely, also being one of my favorites, a very nostalgic set to most, just definitely isn't worth the price, especially in today's day and age with these other options on the table. You can get 3 of the UCS version for 1 of these, which is just kind of crazy to think about. Now, don't get me wrong, this set's great. It's amazing. If it's a set that you've wanted to get your hands on at any point in the past, definitely being a grail for most, I do recommend picking it up at some point if you ever get the opportunity. It's a great set. However, it's just not going to be the best bang for your buck at the insanely high price point. Given that this is an over 20-year-old set, makes sense that it is as expensive as it is, and it's just a set that's not accessible to most people. Next, we have the 2025 playset with a retail of $69.99 in the US, and while I do think there is some pretty good value here when it comes to the minifigures, especially with the Llama Sue minifigure, I still think a $70 retail in the US is a bit overpriced for this set. And to be honest, I think that I would wait for this one to go 20% off. I think at 70 bucks, it's really not worth it. Yes, there's a lot going for this set. However, I just feel like you can get it for a better deal, and I definitely wouldn't recommend getting it at the price that it is at. And I think you can definitely do better for yourself waiting for this one to go on sale. Which leaves us with my overall pick when it comes to value, which is the UCS version. Now, yes, this is a $300 set, one that a lot of people won't be able to afford, but I think if you have the money and you really want to get the best bang for your buck, the UCS one is just a no-brainer. While the minifigures may leave a little bit to be desired, I think the Jango Fett is amazing, but the Boba Fett is definitely a bit lackluster. It's really the build that drives this one home, and it's definitely a lot better than the other two by a very large margin. It has so much going for it, and I know this really isn't the perfect option for many people, either if it is out of their budget or if they just don't have the space for it. I just overall think realistically, if you're going to be spending the money, this is the one that you should be buying. The 2002 version is just way too expensive, and especially when looking at this new playset, at a $70 price point, it is really expensive. And four playsets equals one of the UCS set, basically around that. And for that, I just think that the UCS set is a better bang for your buck. Now, out of all three of these sets, I have to say they're all good options. Now, they all have some other things going for them, and obviously, I think that the UCS version is the best build as well as having the best value. But I think, if you're on a budget, you want to save some money, but you still want a Jango Fett, that the playset is definitely a better option. It's $70 in comparison to the 300. So if you really just want a Jango Fett Slave 1 and you don't care too much about the build and you really just want the minifigure, then I say go ahead and get the playset. Now, the only one that I think, is a bit different is with this old version from 2002. It being so expensive and rare to find and get your hands on just isn't really going to be worth the money when it comes to the average collector. But if you are someone who finds the set very nostalgic like I do, it's one that you really want for your collection, you can definitely find it for a good deal. But at the end of the day, I think that my overall opinion out of all of these sets, the winner would have to go to the UCS model. I love the OG 2002 version. I think that it is very nostalgic. I think it has the best play features out of any set from 2002, and honestly, out of pretty much all of the early Lego sets, it just has some really good play features unmatched by any other set. So for that, I think it is amazing. And as for the newest of the play sets, honestly, doesn't really do it for me. However, I also haven't had much time to kind of look at it and kind of get familiar with it, but I do think it is still a good cheaper option to get a Jango Fett and to get a Jango Fett Slave 1. But I do think if you're going to be spending the money, you'd be better off buying the UCS version, and that is why I have to say it's my overall pick when it comes to the opinion for the category. And the scores are in, and the winner is, pretty much a landslide for the UCS version. Not only is it the best value, the best model, as well as my overall pick, I just think it is a great set. But don't get me wrong, the other two are definitely some good contenders. I think the 2002 one, definitely holds up today. Over 20 years later, I think that's crazy. I think it is a very timeless set. And the newer playset, while being a little bit overpriced, definitely still has some fun features. But let me know down below in the comments of this video which of these three is your favorite, as well as any other sets that you want to see me compare in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe. Drew, signing out.